So PTP, I'm talking about TEEs. What is a TEE? I guess they've been referenced enough tonight that if you don't know, this is a bit late, and I will skip the explanation. So the disagreement that I have, or like many people have, is with this kind of mental model of how blockchains and encrypted mempools could work. So there's a very simplistic kind of framing in which we imagine a user encrypting their transaction, these transactions being ordered in a block and committed to, and only then revealed. This may be practical in some settings, but one thing we've realized in practice is that there are some incentive problems that come along with this. A bunch of recent research has looked into spam transactions, and what exactly spam is maybe hard to define, but transactions that revert and make no changes to the state of the database, we can probably think of as spam. And this can, at its peak, can reach very, very high fractions of the sort of traffic or transactions that blockchains see, and in a space where we are resource constrained, using a large fraction of our resources for transactions that do effectively nothing and push up fees is not desirable. So if you want to read more about this kind of work, you should look at this blog post that we came out with and a academic treatment from Lioba, who was speaking earlier, and her co-authors. To explain basically why I'm connecting encrypted mempools with spam, from an economic perspective, these user transactions will be doing things like moving prices on chain and maybe creating arbitrage opportunities. And usually these opportunities appear after, or they can appear right after, a specific transaction. And so an arbitrageur's strategy, especially when competing with other arbitrageurs, is to land their transaction at an optimal point in the block. But when there isn't a clear way of targeting a specific point in a block because the information about user transactions isn't available before, for example, the only strategy or the best strategy for landing this position, or as close as possible, is to send many transactions, the vast majority of them that not actually doing anything. So as an alternative, or maybe a complementary technology that can be used in a larger scheme, we can look at TEEs. And again, here I point to a blog post called Searching in TDX. You should be able to find there on Google. And this very complicated diagram, which I don't fully understand, basically points to the idea that we can have some logic in a TEE that sort of verifiably, within the security model at least, processes user transactions that are encrypted to this box. And the sort of high-level explanation of what happens here is that the arbitrage or the economic opportunity that was attractive to the spammers before can be handled by this node before the sort of scarce resources consumed, like, for example, the limited block space is consumed. And this is actually something that we see deployed in practice in many different ways. The most well-known ways is like Buildernet, which is a Flashbox product, but also on Solana, Jitter, which is producing most of the blocks, has also come out with a TE-based design. And the sort of outcome that we're looking for here is a setup where now, well, like, yeah, I guess a simplified explanation is that this TE node can produce a transaction that is placed behind the target transaction that's been detected in this TE before being committed to the block, so that the arbitrageur has no opportunity through spamming to land their transaction behind there's no incentive to try target any of the user transactions. So that's like one point I wanted to communicate, and that's sort of the most concrete thing I can say. I just want to end on a very open-ended kind of question, which is, how else can we use TEs outside of consensus? So there's some research that looks at how TEs can be used in consensus to protect against equivocation, to change adversarial model from Byzantine behavior to like crash fault or emission fault tolerance. But there are also some attacks that happen not in consensus protocols, but in like flooding and P2P networks and eclipse attacks and these kind of things. And I'm just sort of curious if we can leverage this TEE abstraction to mitigate some of these attacks or improve efficiency, for example, by bounding the number of peers to which any given node can encrypt transactions, or the view of a hash table they can communicate in a DHT protocol. I don't have any concrete ideas, but I think this is something interesting to explore. I'd love to chat with anyone who understands these attacks better. That is the end of my talk.